When humanity first revealed its new warship to the galaxy, everyone expected something incredible, something fast, sleek, and full of cutting-edge weapons. Instead, what they saw made the entire Galactic Council laugh. The ship was slow, its armor looked outdated, and its weapons were simple, firing solid metal projectiles instead of glowing energy beams. Compared to the advanced alien fleets that could move at lightning speed, the human vessel looked like a floating piece of old scrap metal. Reporters from dozens of alien worlds gathered to see the launch. They couldn't believe their eyes. Some even called it a joke. Others said humanity still didn't understand what real war looked like. The ship was named Horizon's Spear, and while humans spoke proudly of it, the rest of the galaxy saw nothing more than a rusty relic trying to play soldier among giants. The laughter didn't stop there. Even Earth's allies joined in. The Archelons, a species famous for their elegant energy cruisers, publicly mocked the design. "You built a rock and called it a warship," one of their admirals sneered during a council meeting. The humans smiled politely but didn't respond. They had heard the insults before. They had been underestimated before too. From the outside, Horizon's Spear did look old-fashioned. It moved slower than any other ship in its class. Its armor was thick and heavy, almost primitive. Instead of plasma turrets or quantum missiles, it carried huge rail cannons that launched solid slugs of metal, something most advanced races had abandoned centuries ago. There were no bright colors or shining lights on its surface, just dull gray metal and a faint hum from deep within its engines. But what no one knew was that everything on that ship had a purpose. The thickness of its hull, the strange layout of its compartments, even the odd humming sound from its engines, all of it had been carefully designed for reasons the humans never explained. When questioned about their choices, the engineers simply said, "It's built to last." For months, alien networks replayed the footage of Horizon's Spear's first test flight. Commentators mocked it as the slowest military vessel ever made. Memes and jokes spread across space. Some alien comedians even created entire skits about humans trying to fight with rocks and hope. But back on Earth, no one seemed to care. The humans didn't argue, didn't defend their design, and didn't try to explain. They simply continued testing the ship, quietly recording data and making small changes no one noticed. The crew assigned to Horizon's Spear trained in silence. They knew how the galaxy viewed them. Many of them had seen the broadcasts, heard the laughter, and read the jokes. But deep inside, they carried something the galaxy couldn't measure, a quiet determination. Humanity had always been underestimated. From the moment they entered galactic society, they had been treated as newcomers, slow learners, and fragile beings from a dangerous planet. But history had taught them that survival was not about pride or appearance. It was about endurance, patience, and the ability to learn from failure. When the ship began its long-range trials beyond Mars' orbit, even more critics appeared. Alien observers noted that Horizon's Spear moved awkwardly and reacted too slowly to commands. In a real war, it would be destroyed before firing a single shot, said one report from a council military analyst. The human captain only smiled and said, "We'll see." While the rest of the galaxy measured power by speed and firepower, humans had a different idea of strength. They knew wars weren't always won by the fastest or the flashiest. Sometimes they were won by those who could take a hit and keep moving forward. The heavy armor that others mocked was built to absorb punishment. The slow engines were designed for long endurance missions. The old-style projectile weapons didn't rely on fancy energy grids. They worked even when electronic systems failed. Every single weakness others saw was part of a deeper plan. What the galaxy didn't realize was that Horizon's Spear wasn't made to fight the same way they did. It wasn't a ship meant for quick skirmishes or hit-and-run tactics. It was made for survival, for the kind of war where everything could go wrong. It carried supplies for months, spare parts for every system, and hidden compartments filled with experimental equipment. Even the crew quarters were heavily reinforced, making the ship feel more like a bunker than a vessel. Inside the ship, life was quiet. The corridors were narrow and dimly lit. Machines hummed softly in the background. The crew went about their duties with calm discipline, checking systems again and again, running drills for scenarios that seemed unlikely to everyone else. Some of them wondered why they trained for things like total power loss or weapon failure, until their captain told them, "We prepare for the worst because one day, The worst will come. The council didn't take those words seriously. To them, humans were overcautious, almost paranoid. But those who studied Earth's past understood why. Humanity had faced wars, disasters, and extinction-level threats on their own planet long before they reached the stars. They had learned that survival required patience, adaptability, and above all, resilience. That mindset was built into the design of Horizon's spear. Months passed. The ship continued its silent patrols near the edge of known space. Every time it passed by an alien station, it drew attention. Traders pointed and whispered, "Look at that thing, it's so slow it's practically crawling." The humans heard the remarks but never replied. They had grown used to being the subject of ridicule. But in private, the ship's engineers kept refining its systems. The engine that looked outdated was actually equipped with a prototype reactor that could power the ship for years without refueling. The armor that looked crude was layered with reactive materials that could absorb energy blasts and disperse them harmlessly. Even the weapon systems had a secret mode, one that used the rail cannons not just for direct fire, but for launching projectiles capable of creating shockwaves in space. None of these details were shared with the Galactic Council. Humanity had learned to keep some of its secrets close. Trust in the galaxy was earned slowly, and so far most other species had given humans little reason to reveal everything they knew. So they let the world believe Horizon's spear was just a slow, heavy piece of metal drifting through the stars. Back on Earth, some citizens worried about the negative attention. "Why let them mock us?" they asked. But the leaders of the project didn't see it as a bad thing. "Let them laugh," one official said quietly. "It's better they don't know what it can really do." As time went on, even some human soldiers began to doubt. They watched how effortlessly alien ships glided through space, how quickly they could jump between systems, and how advanced their technology seemed. They wondered if maybe humanity really was behind. But then they remembered Earth's history, how people once used wooden ships to cross oceans, how they flew fragile planes into the sky, how they built machines that reached the moon. Humanity had never started as the strongest, but they always ended stronger than anyone expected. The Horizon Spear became a quiet symbol of that spirit. It didn't look powerful, but it represented something deeper: human stubbornness, patience, and the refusal to give up no matter the odds. The laughter from other races only fueled that fire. The crew didn't need approval. They just needed time. On one of its routine missions, the ship passed close to a nebula rich with radiation storms. Most alien vessels would have avoided it, fearing damage to their delicate systems. But the Horizon Spear entered without hesitation. The storms hit hard, shaking the hull and sending sparks through the control room. But the ship held strong. Its heavy armor and manual controls allowed it to keep moving even as communication signals cut out. When it finally emerged from the other side, intact and steady, the crew cheered quietly to themselves. They had proven something important, not to others but to themselves. News of that mission reached the council, but it barely made a ripple. To them, the humans had simply been lucky. They still saw the Horizon Spear as nothing more than a slow experiment. No one suspected that within a short time, the fate of the entire galaxy would depend on that very ship. As the vessel continued its silent journey back toward the inner colonies, the stars ahead glowed faintly red, a strange sign picked up by long-range scanners. The crew didn't know it yet, but something was moving in that darkness. Something far worse than any mockery or insult they had endured, and when it came, the laughter of the galaxy would stop forever. For now, though, Horizon's Spear drifted quietly through the void, its engines humming softly like a heartbeat in the dark. The humans aboard it continued their quiet routines, unaware that their slow ship was about to become the most feared weapon the galaxy had ever known. When the warning first reached the Galactic Council, nobody believed it. A faint signal, broken and trembling, carried across deep space. It came from a research outpost near the far edge of mapped territory. The message was short, panicked, and full of static. Most of the words were lost, but a few pieces broke through clearly enough to send a cold feeling through anyone who heard them. Unknown fleet. Shadows. No response. They're everywhere. Then silence. Total, endless silence. The council at first treated it like a malfunction. Maybe the outpost had suffered a reactor failure, maybe a meteor strike, or maybe the crew panicked over nothing and accidentally cut off communication. Everyone had a different theory. and every theory tried to ignore one truth. The signal carried real fear. Fear strong enough to shake voices that were normally calm and trained. A small investigation team was sent to check. They never arrived. Their ship went dark halfway there. No distress call, no emergency beacon, nothing. It simply vanished. That was the moment the council began to worry. To be sure it wasn't some navigation accident, they sent a second fleet. 20 ships, well-armed, well-equipped, fast, only one ship returned. And the crew aboard the surviving ship looked like they had stared into something no mind was ready to understand. Their report made the entire chamber fall silent. They had encountered an enemy. A massive force unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They moved silently without engine signatures. Their ships didn't show up on scanners. They didn't broadcast messages or demands. They simply appeared out of the dark and destroyed everything in sight. The crew called them the Veilborn, because the ship slipped in and out of darkness like living shadows. That single report was enough to send fear rippling through every council world. Panic broadcasts started spreading. Civilizations that had been peaceful for centuries began preparing evacuation plans. Soldiers who had never seen real war were suddenly being rushed to their stations. The council responded with urgency, pulling entire armadas from their borders. The strongest fleets from dozens of species gathered. They sent them forward with confidence, at least on the surface. Behind closed doors, leaders whispered to one another that they had no idea what they were facing. While the rest of the galaxy trembled, humanity watched closely. They weren't part of the first wave of defense. The council didn't trust humans enough to put them in the front lines, and many still considered humanity too inexperienced, too cautious, and too slow. Humans weren't invited into emergency strategy meetings. They weren't asked to send ships. They were told to wait. Earth followed those instructions, but they were not blind to what was happening. Their long-range sensors picked up the same faint anomalies. They monitored the same dark regions of space. And while the council debated, humanity began quietly preparing. When the battle reports began coming in, they were far worse than anyone expected. Entire fleets gone. Not defeated. Not damaged. Gone. Some never even fired a single shot. Others fought for minutes before being overwhelmed and erased. The Veilborn ships moved like they were alive. They twisted through space with impossible precision, slipping past shields, creating distortions that disabled weapons, attacking from angles no one thought possible. No matter how fast a ship was, the enemy was faster. No matter how advanced the shields were, the enemy found a way through. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy felt powerless. As panic spread, a strange shift happened. The same species that mocked humanity not long ago suddenly turned to Earth with desperate eyes. Humanity was asked quietly at first to contribute. Any ships, any technology, anything that could help. Not out of respect, but out of desperation. Humans agreed, but when they sent the Horizon spear, the room full of council officials fell into uneasy silence. Some lowered their heads. Others whispered under their breath. A few even shook their heads openly. That slow thing again? This is a battle, not a museum show. It won't last 10 seconds. The humans heard every word. Still, they said nothing. The Horizon spear began moving toward the conflict zone. It didn't rush. It didn't accelerate to its limits. It traveled at the same steady, slow pace it always had. To outside observers, it looked careless, almost foolish, like it didn't understand the danger ahead. But inside the ship, the crew knew exactly what they were doing. They weren't heading into battle like heroes. They weren't eager or overconfident. They moved carefully, studying every bit of information coming through the scanners. Even though the galaxy mocked their speed, the humans understood something no one else did. Speed doesn't matter when you don't know what you're facing. On the way, the crew intercepted fragments of transmissions. We're losing control. Someone help us. They're inside our shields. They're behind us. How did they? Then static. Each message added a heavy weight to the air inside the ship. But the crew remained focused. They didn't panic. They didn't shake. They simply continued gathering data, mapping patterns, comparing every signal to Earth's own military archives. Human history was full of surprises and disasters. Humanity had survived invasions, wars, and threats that had once seemed impossible. That long record of hardship gave humans a strange advantage. They didn't assume victory. They assumed danger. They assumed loss. And they prepared for the worst. The closer they got to the last known position of the lost fleets, the darker space felt. The region was covered in drifting debris, broken hulls, shattered wings, twisted metal floating like ghostly reminders of battles that lasted minutes. The air in the control room grew tense. Even the hum of the engines felt quieter than usual. Other species saw these places and felt hopeless. Humans looked at them and felt something different, a quiet determination. They had seen ruin before, they had rebuilt before, and deep inside, they carried a belief that even the strongest enemy had a weakness. The horizon's spear slowed further as it approached the debris field. Human scanners, outdated by Council standards, began picking up small traces of unusual radiation. Something pulsed gently through the wreckage, like a heartbeat echoing in the silence. The crew recognized it immediately. It wasn't natural. It wasn't environmental. It was deliberate, a tracking signal, a lure. The Veilborn had left something behind, an invisible path that their ships traveled through. Most Council fleets were too fast to notice it. They raced past without slowing, straight into the traps waiting for them. But the slow, patient movement of the horizon spear allowed the sensors to observe each pulse carefully, mapping their rhythm and direction. The ship drifted deeper. Every few minutes the lights flickered as the strange energy fields brushed against the hull. But unlike the delicate systems on other ships, the human vessel held firm. Its heavy armor absorbed the distortions. Its simple wiring didn't overload. Its mechanical systems continued working even when the electronic ones struggled. For the first time, the humans saw the enemy clearly. Not their ships, but their trail. A signature pattern, a rhythm, a weakness, something the Veilborn likely assumed no one would ever notice. The humans began recording everything, every pulse, every shift, every distortion in the void. They didn't fire a single shot. They didn't make any aggressive move. They simply watched, learned, and mapped. It was quiet, careful work. The kind of work the galaxy never valued. But it was exactly the kind of work humanity excelled at. The aliens watching from a distance whispered again. Why are they moving so slowly? They're afraid. They're wasting time, but they were wrong. The humans weren't wasting time. They were solving the first puzzle the galaxy hadn't even realized existed. As the ship drifted deeper into the darkness, a faint movement appeared on the scanners, barely a blur, just a ripple in the void. A Veilborn scout ship, silent, fast, deadly. It crept toward the horizon spear, unaware that it had finally been detected. The humans watched quietly, studying its entrance vector, its movement pattern, the way it phased in and out of visibility. For the first time in this entire war, someone was truly observing the enemy instead of running from it. The galaxy fought with fear. Humanity fought with patience, and patience was about to change everything. The space around the horizon spear was quiet, too quiet. The stars looked dim through the ship's viewing ports, and a thick field of debris floated around them like frozen ghosts from a battle that ended too fast. Every piece of wreckage told a story. Burned metal, twisted armor, and shattered symbols from alien fleets that once thought themselves invincible. Now they drifted silently, reminders of how quickly power could mean nothing. The crew worked carefully, scanning every inch of the wreckage. They didn't move fast. They didn't rush. Each reading mattered. Every faint energy trail was a clue. The air on the bridge was tense, yet calm in its own way. The humans didn't speak much. They didn't need to. They all understood that this wasn't a normal mission anymore. This was something else, something bigger than anyone had imagined. Outside, a soft shimmer passed across space. It was almost invisible, like a ripple in water. Most sensors would have ignored it, assuming it was interference from the nearby radiation field. But the humans had learned to look twice. The pattern repeated every few minutes, each time a little closer. They had found the Veilborn's path. The aliens didn't use normal flight patterns. They didn't travel in open space like the rest of the galaxy's fleets. They slipped through folds in the vacuum, pockets of distorted energy that made them invisible and untouchable. The faster a ship moved, the more likely it was to miss these distortions entirely. But Horizon Spear, with its slow and steady pace, could feel them like vibrations through the hull. That slow speed everyone mocked had become their greatest strength. Every time the distortion appeared, the humans took readings. They recorded the exact energy levels, frequencies, and timing. Slowly, a map began forming on their screens. a web of faint lines and pulses. It wasn't random. The Veilborn were using hidden corridors, short bursts through folded space, almost like tunnels only they could see. The realization hit the crew hard. This was why every other fleet had failed. They weren't being ambushed, they were being trapped. The Veilborn had designed their movements to lure enemies into zones where scanners and weapons wouldn't work. Once a ship entered one of those zones, it was already doomed. The crew worked in silence, tracing the invisible network across the void. Each discovery brought more questions. How did the Veilborn build these tunnels? Were they using technology or something else entirely? The readings didn't make sense. The energy didn't match any known source. It was as if the laws of physics themselves were bending in those spaces. Hours passed. The slow hum of the engines filled the silence. No one wanted to stop, but everyone could feel the pressure building. They knew the enemy was near, watching, waiting. The ship's lights flickered now and then, reacting to the strange waves moving through the area. Then it happened. A shape appeared on the edge of the scanners. Faint, small, moving in patterns that made no logical sense. It would appear for a second, disappear, then reappear somewhere else entirely. The crew locked onto it. Every instinct said it was a Veilborn scout. The ship didn't attack. It didn't fire. It simply drifted closer, like a predator testing the water before striking. The humans didn't move. They lowered power output, dimmed external lights, and let their ship blend into the dark. Their plan was simple: watch, record, and learn. Minutes turned into an hour. The alien scout circled through the debris, its movements sharp and deliberate. Every few seconds, its hull shimmered as it phased between visible and invisible states. The pattern of light and shadow looked almost alive. It wasn't just technology. It was art made from fear and precision. For the first time, humans were seeing their enemy without dying for it. And what they saw sent chills through everyone. The Veilborn ship had no visible weapons, no engines that glowed. Its surface seemed to absorb light. It looked more like a living shadow than a machine, but when it moved, small distortions rippled around it, bending light and matter. That distortion was the key. The crew worked fast, recording every pulse. They discovered that the distortions followed a rhythm, like breathing. Every few seconds, the alien ship released a wave of energy, and then pulled it back, almost like it was inhaling the space around it. That was how it vanished from sight. The humans didn't try to fight it. They didn't even raise shields. Instead, they stayed still and patient, learning how the creature or machine behaved. Their ship's slow systems allowed them to run deep analysis without interference from high-speed circuits. It was the kind of observation no other species could have done, simply because no one else would have stayed calm that long in the dark. After a while, the alien ship turned and vanished again. One moment it was there, the next it was gone. But the humans didn't panic. They kept tracking the distortions, and when they compared the energy readings to the earlier map, they noticed something incredible. The Veilborn's hidden tunnel pattern pulsed in sync with the scout's energy waves. The scout wasn't just traveling through the tunnels. It was creating them. That realization changed everything. If they could learn how those tunnels formed, they could predict where the enemy would appear. They could even block them, or worse, use them. But to do that, they needed more data. And that meant staying longer in one of the most dangerous regions in the galaxy. The crew gathered to decide what to do next. Some wanted to retreat and send the data to Earth immediately. Others believed they had a once-in-a-lifetime chance to learn the enemy's full secret. The decision was difficult, but the answer came from a simple truth. If they didn't find a way to stop the Veilborn, no one else would, so they stayed. For the next few days, the Horizon Spear moved slowly through the shadowy region, pretending to be nothing more than another piece of wreckage. They used decoy signals to confuse any nearby Veilborn ships, and they continued scanning the invisible tunnels. The data they gathered was priceless: frequency patterns, tunnel durations, even moments when the distortions weakened for a split second. Each of those weak points was an opening, a small window of vulnerability. That was when the humans started preparing something new. Buried deep in the ship's design was an experimental system, one that most of the crew didn't even know existed. It wasn't meant for offense or defense. It was designed for studying high-energy distortions. On Earth, it had been built for research, but in the dark silence of this war, it could be turned into a weapon, or at least a shield against one. The engineers got to work quietly. modifying the ship's energy coils and adjusting reactor output. They redirected power through old-fashioned manual circuits, the kind that didn't overload when space itself twisted around them. Every adjustment was careful and deliberate. The ship might have been old and slow, but its systems were strong and reliable. Days passed. The galaxy still thought humanity was hiding. Council transmissions continued to mock their inactivity. But the truth was that the humans were building something powerful. Knowledge. And knowledge in war was more dangerous than any weapon. On the 6th day of their silent study, the ship's long-range sensors picked up a massive surge. The patterns they had tracked suddenly multiplied across space. The readings went off the charts. It wasn't just 1 or 2 scouts this time, it was a fleet. A full Veilborn strike force moving toward the central colonies. The humans knew what that meant. The Council's remaining fleets were already regrouping in that region. They were walking straight into a trap. The crew exchanged quiet looks. There wasn't time to send a full warning through official channels. By the time the Council debated the report, it would be too late. They needed to act immediately. The captain gave a simple order. The Horizon Spear changed course, its engines humming louder as it left the debris field. It was time to test everything they had learned. As they moved through the dark, the ship's sensors picked up faint distortions ahead. The Veilborn fleet was already spreading its invisible tunnels, setting the trap. The humans began aligning their new system. The modified coils started to glow softly, building energy in the reactor's heart. The crew watched the readings rise, calm and focused. Their plan wasn't to attack, not yet. It was to reveal. If their calculations were correct, the energy pulse they were preparing would disrupt the distortion fields for just a few seconds. Enough to make the invisible visible. Enough to show the galaxy what they were really facing. The pulse fired. For a moment, space itself seemed to tremble. The stars blurred and a flash of blue light spread across the dark. Then suddenly the hidden tunnels appeared, bright outlines in the void, connecting dozens of dark, sleek shapes. The Veilborn fleet was there, massive and terrifying, caught in the open for the first time. The humans had done it. They had revealed the enemy. For the first time, the galaxy could finally see the danger it was facing. And for the first time, humanity had proven that patience, not power, could change the course of a war. And though no one knew it yet, this was only the beginning. The Horizon Spear had just shown the universe its first real weakness, and in the days to come, that single discovery would turn the slowest, most mocked ship in the galaxy into something every alien would soon learn to fear. When the pulse wave ended, silence filled the command room. The screens flickered as the sensors adjusted to the sudden burst of light. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then slowly, the outlines began to appear. Dozens of dark, sharp shapes scattered across space like shards of glass. They had been hidden just moments ago, but now every ship was clear, glowing faintly in the aftershock of the human energy burst. It was the Veilborn fleet. The same fleet that had destroyed every army before it. But now, for the first time, they were visible. The crew stared in disbelief. The sight was terrifying, yet strangely beautiful. Each ship looked like a shadow carved into metal, long, thin, and covered in strange patterns that moved like veins of light under their surface. Some appeared almost alive, pulsing faintly as if breathing. But under all that mystery, there was something else. Weakness. The humans could see it. While the rest of the galaxy built ships for speed and power, the Veilborn had built theirs for stealth and confusion. Their armor was thin, their designs narrow. They had no thick plating or heat protection, because they had never needed it. They always relied on being unseen. But now that they were visible, they looked vulnerable. The Horizon Spear floated silently among the wreckage, its engines humming softly. The pulse had drained part of its power systems, but the crew didn't care. They were too focused on what they were witnessing. The galaxy's most feared enemy was right there in front of them. Then the moment ended. The Veilborn ships began to move again, shifting with unnatural speed. Their stealth field started rebuilding, their forms fading back into the darkness. The window of visibility closed quickly, but the humans had recorded everything, every angle, every movement, every signature. The data was priceless. The captain gave the order to retreat from the region. The ship turned slowly, still unnoticed among the larger chaos. They had done what no one else could. They had revealed the enemy's secret. Now they just needed to survive long enough to share it, But the Veilborn were not blind. Something about the pulse had drawn their attention. One of their smaller ships changed course, heading directly toward the humans. Its movements were sharp and fluid, cutting through the debris with unnatural precision. The crew acted fast. Power was rerouted. The Horizon's spear went dark, shutting down non-essential systems to look like another piece of dead metal. The crew held their breath as the alien ship passed close, so close that its shadow moved across the hull. For a few tense minutes, no one moved a muscle. Finally, the scanner lines showed the alien ship moving away. The humans waited a few moments longer before slowly reactivating their systems. The hum of power returning through the ship felt like a heartbeat returning to life. They had survived. The journey back toward friendly space felt longer than usual. The ship's engines ran at half power to avoid detection. The crew took shifts resting, though sleep was difficult. Every time they closed their eyes, they saw those glowing patterns. The way the enemy ships shimmered, like ghosts floating through the dark. By the time they reached the outer defense line, news of the battle had already begun spreading. The Council fleets had faced heavy losses again, just as the humans predicted. But for the first time, they also had hope. The data from Horizon's spear reached them before the ship itself did. The recording showed how the Veilborn fleets appeared when hit by the energy pulse. Every nation watched the footage in silence. For the first time in weeks, the galaxy saw proof that the Veilborn were not invincible. When the Horizon's spear docked at the nearest command station, it didn't arrive like a hero. It looked battered, dull, and slow, just as everyone remembered. But this time the laughter was gone. Instead, there was awe. Soldiers, engineers, and diplomats from dozens of species came to see the crew. They asked questions, studied the recordings, and tried to understand how a single slow human ship had managed what no fleet could. The humans didn't brag. They simply shared what they knew. They explained how patience and observation had revealed the hidden tunnels, how the energy pulse had disrupted them, and how the enemy relied too much on stealth to survive in open combat. The Council listened carefully, and for the first time, they didn't interrupt. Plans were made immediately. The galaxy would create new detection systems based on human readings. A new wave of countermeasures would be built using the same kind of pulse energy Horizon's spear had developed. Humanity was asked to share its designs, and though some leaders hesitated, Earth agreed. This wasn't about pride. It was about survival. But as the Council prepared their new defenses, the humans kept one secret to themselves. The pulse that had revealed the Veilborn had a second mode, a deeper function buried inside the ship's systems. Something not even the Council knew about. It wasn't just for detection. It could also disrupt enemy movement completely, freezing the hidden tunnels mid-space. However, using it came with a risk. The pulse overloaded the ship's core each time. The humans knew that another burst might destroy Horizon's spear. But if the situation ever became desperate enough, they were ready to take that chance. As the galaxy prepared its counterattack, tension spread across every world. Factories worked day and night, building new weapons and shields. Fleets gathered near the border zones. The Council planned to launch a massive joint assault to push the Veilborn back. But the humans were quiet. They didn't boast about revenge or victory. They just continued upgrading their ship in silence. The engineers added new shielding around the pulse coils, reinforcing the reactor housing and tuning the rail cannons. Even though those weapons were old-fashioned by galactic standards, the humans trusted them. They didn't rely on energy grids that could be jammed or hacked. They fired physical slugs, simple, unstoppable, and brutally effective when aimed right. When the day of the joint assault arrived, hundreds of ships lined up across space. Every fleet in the galaxy was represented. It was a sight no one had ever seen before. So many nations united under one cause. Humanity's Horizon spear stood among them, small and unimpressive compared to the shining alien vessels around it. But the other captains didn't mock it this time. They had seen what it could do. As the fleets moved forward, the humans kept scanning. They could already see the first signs of the Veilborn's tunnels forming ahead. The distortions rippled faintly like waves in the dark. The Council ships rushed forward, eager to strike first. They fired volleys of plasma and missiles into the darkness. For a moment it looked like they might succeed, but then the distortions vanished. The enemy had disappeared again. A sudden burst of energy hit the front line. In an instant, half of the leading ships were gone, erased in flashes of white light. The same nightmare was happening again. The Council fleets began to panic, scattering in every direction. Orders overlapped, communication lines filled with static. But through all the chaos, one ship kept moving straight ahead. The Horizon's spear advanced slowly, steady and calm. The humans didn't chase shadows. They knew where to look. The crew began charging the pulse system again, though this time the readings were unstable. The reactor was already at dangerous levels. They didn't have time to wait. The captain gave the order. The pulse fired again, brighter and stronger than before. The blast spread out in a massive wave, and once more the Veil-born ships were revealed. But this time the pulse did more than just show them. It trapped them. The distortions flickered violently, locking the alien fleet in half-phased space. The humans opened fire. The rail cannons roared, launching heavy projectiles faster than sound. The slugs tore through the Veil-born ships, smashing through their fragile armor. The rest of the Council fleet saw what was happening and joined in, firing everything they had. For the first time, the galaxy fought back with unity, and it was working. The Veil-born fleet began to collapse. One by one, their ships exploded or vanished, unable to maintain their stealth fields. The hidden corridors they once used to escape started collapsing in on themselves. But victory came at a cost. The Horizon Spear's reactor was overheating. Warning lights flashed across the bridge. The pulse system had taken too much energy, and the ship was starting to shake. But the crew refused to stop. They kept firing, determined to end what they started. As the last of the Veil-born ships broke apart, the humans finally powered down their weapons. The silence that followed was deafening. The battlefield was filled with debris and light from burning wrecks. The once invisible enemy was gone. Across the galaxy, the news spread like wildfire. Humanity had done it again. The slow, outdated warship had turned the tide of the war. The same ship everyone once mocked had become a symbol of hope. But deep inside, the humans knew this wasn't the end. The Veil-born weren't gone for good. Somewhere out in the far reaches of space, they were watching, learning just as humanity had done. And when they came back, Horizon's spear would be ready, because humans had something the rest of the galaxy was only beginning to understand. They didn't fight for glory. They didn't fight for pride. They fought for survival, and that made them unstoppable. The ship's engines glowed softly as it drifted through the fading light of battle. Around them, other fleets celebrated. But inside the Horizon Spear, the crew sat quietly, exhausted yet calm. They knew what they had achieved, and they knew that somewhere in the dark, the war was far from over. After the first major battle, the galaxy's fleets began to recover. Broken ships were repaired, systems were rebuilt, and cities far from the front lines started to breathe again. For most species, relief came in waves. They had survived the Veil-born, at least for now. The sense of victory was temporary, fragile, and shaky, but the humans aboard Horizon Spear didn't celebrate. They knew better. The ship had survived. The crew had survived. But the war was far from over. Inside the command room, the atmosphere was quiet but tense. The crew worked in shifts, analyzing the data collected during the battle. Every movement, every response of the Veil-born fleet, every pulse of their energy fields had been recorded. The humans had learned more in those few moments of combat than any other species had learned in decades. They had seen how the enemy adapted, how it reacted to attacks, and, more importantly, how it could be predicted. The slower pace of the Horizon Spear, which so many had mocked, had once again proved its value. While the faster fleets rushed into the fight, often overextending or missing critical cues, the humans had watched, learned, and waited for the right moment. Patience had given them an advantage no speed could ever match. The crew spent hours going over the battle recordings. They marked the exact moments when the enemy's distortion tunnels flickered or weakened. They noted how energy pulses disrupted the Veil-born ships, forcing them into patterns that revealed their vulnerabilities. They measured timing, distance, and angles. Every piece of information was being fed into the ship's systems, which could calculate outcomes far faster than any Council fleet computer. While the rest of the galaxy repaired ships and rebuilt confidence, humanity began adapting. They weren't just waiting for the next battle. They were preparing to change the war entirely. For the first time, humans realized something important. The Veil-born didn't fight like a conventional enemy. They weren't thinking about honor or strategy. They weren't responding to standard tactics. They were learning creatures, instinctively adjusting to every move their opponent made. In their own way, they were alive, and fighting them required more than firepower. It required understanding. The humans spent weeks refining their approach. They modified the ship's sensors to detect even the faintest energy fluctuations in folded space. They updated their pulse systems to create broader, more precise waves that could hold the distortions open for longer. They reinforced the hull and optimized the rail cannons to fire at exact calculated velocities, maximizing their impact on fragile enemy armor. Every system was connected to one central goal: to anticipate the enemy before it could act. Meanwhile, rumors of the human warship spread across the galaxy. Other fleets, who once dismissed the ship as a slow joke, now spoke of it in quiet tones, sometimes even fearfully. Humans had become an unexpected symbol, a demonstration that patience, knowledge, and resilience could be more dangerous than raw speed or flashy weapons. And yet, the humans aboard the Horizon Spear remained grounded. They didn't see themselves as heroes. They didn't seek recognition. They understood that the first battle had been just one moment in a much longer war. If they let pride take hold, it could blind them to the danger still lurking in the shadows. As they moved deeper into space, more Veil-born activity began appearing on long-range scanners. These weren't small fleets or scouts. They were groups of ships traveling together in complex patterns, testing defenses, probing systems, and searching for weaknesses. The humans studied every movement carefully. They didn't rush. They didn't fire prematurely. Every decision was measured, deliberate, precise. The ship's slow movement allowed them to track multiple targets at once. While other fleets could only react to what appeared suddenly on their sensors, humans could anticipate, calculate, and prepare. They were no longer just participants in the war. They were becoming tacticians, predicting the enemy's next steps in ways no one else could. Then came the moment that changed everything. A massive Veil-born formation appeared on the outskirts of a newly settled colony. Unlike previous encounters, this group moved deliberately, coordinated with almost terrifying precision. They swept across space like a predator, silent and invisible to most scanners. The colony's defense fleet was unprepared. Reports indicated panic as shields failed and stations went offline one by one. While the galaxy scrambled to respond, the Horizon's Spear approached quietly, unseen. Its slow speed, so often criticized, allowed it to remain below the Veil-born detection threshold. Its crew had studied every pulse, every energy distortion, and knew the enemy's movement almost instinctively. The humans acted. First, the ship's pulse system was activated. A controlled wave of energy swept outward, carefully calibrated to expose the Veil-born ships without overloading the reactor. For a brief moment, the enemy fleet became visible, caught mid-motion, their positions revealed like pieces on a board. Then came the rail cannons. Each projectile was fired with exact timing, aimed at structural weak points the humans had identified from previous encounters. The slugs moved slower than some alien weapons, but their precision was unmatched. Every strike found its mark, forcing the Veil-born to scatter, their coordinated movement disrupted for the first time in the war. The effect on the colony was immediate. Shields stabilized, defense systems regained control, and the surviving fleet began counterattacking. The humans didn't lead the battle, they created the opening, the opportunity, the advantage. Others finished the fight, but it wouldn't have been possible without the Horizon Spear. As the enemy retreated, the crew took stock. The reactor had taken a hit from the pulse, and the ship was running near maximum capacity. Warning lights flashed, but no one panicked. They had trained for this. They had prepared for the moment when every system might be pushed to its limit. And even now, the ship remained functional, the crew calm and focused, ready for whatever came next. In the aftermath, reports began arriving from other fleets. They spoke not only of the effectiveness of the human ship, but of its methods. Observers were stunned by how a slow, seemingly outdated vessel had caused such disruption. They began to study humans, not to mock, but to learn. The captain gathered the crew. There were no speeches, no celebrations, no awards. Instead, there was quiet acknowledgement. A shared understanding that what had been accomplished was only the beginning. Humans had learned something critical. Speed and flashy technology alone would not win the war. The Veil-born could match or exceed every conventional advantage. What mattered was adaptability, understanding, and patience. Knowledge was power, and the humans had shown how it could be applied. Over the following days, the Horizon Spear continued its mission. They mapped the enemy's movements, studied their distortions, and fine-tuned their systems. Each observation was a potential key to survival. They shared what they could with Allied fleets, but much of the most sensitive data was kept on board. The humans understood that in war, some secrets must remain close until the right moment. The rest of the galaxy began to adjust its expectations. No longer was the Horizon Spear seen as a slow, fragile relic. It was a symbol of what humans could achieve when patience, resilience, and intelligence combined. The laughter was gone. Instead, the name of the ship carried weight. Wherever it appeared, fleets paid attention, and the humans themselves, they remained humble. They didn't seek praise, recognition, or fame. They were aware that the next encounter with the Veilborn could be even more dangerous. Each battle revealed new weaknesses, but also new threats. They trained, they analyzed, and they prepared, always ready to push the ship and themselves further. One night, as the ship drifted through a quiet sector, the crew gathered on the bridge to watch distant stars. They spoke little, but their eyes were alert. They knew the war was far from over. Somewhere in the darkness, the Veilborn were learning too. They would adapt. They would strike again. But the humans were ready. They had patience, understanding, and the slow, steady power of a ship built not for speed, but for endurance. And more than that, they had each other. Every calculation, every observation, every risk taken had been done together. That unity, that discipline was the true weapon of humanity. Across the galaxy, whispers began. Other fleets spoke of the human ship with a mix of awe and caution. They told stories of its slow, deliberate approach, of how it could appear at the right moment, strike the enemy, and disappear before anyone else could react. The Veilborn may not have known it yet, but something new had entered the war, a methodical, relentless force that could not be underestimated. And the humans aboard the Horizon Spear? They remained focused, quiet, and patient. They knew that fear was a tool, knowledge was power, and that every slow, careful step they took could save countless lives, because in the end, that was what humanity had learned again and again. Survival was not about being the fastest, the strongest, or the flashiest. It was about understanding, patience, and the courage to act when the moment was right, and the humans were ready to act. The galaxy had changed. What was once fear now carried a new kind of hope, tempered with caution. Humanity's Horizon Spear had become more than a ship. It had become a symbol. Every fleet, every council world, every colony now understood that victory against the Veilborn was possible. But hope alone would not win the war. Strategy, patience, and courage would be needed. The Horizon Spear drifted quietly through the dark, moving slower than any other ship in the assembled fleet. The crew worked tirelessly, checking sensors, calibrating pulse systems, and studying every piece of data gathered from past encounters. They had learned more about the enemy than any other species, but each discovery revealed how unpredictable the Veilborn truly were. Reports came in from council fleets. Some had been successful in minor skirmishes using human techniques. Others had suffered heavy losses because they acted too quickly, too impulsively. The contrast was clear. Speed and aggression were no match for patience and precision. Humanity had led the way, not through force, but through understanding. The next operation was the most ambitious yet. Intelligence had discovered the Veilborn's main fleet gathering near an uninhabited system at the edge of explored space. It was a dangerous gamble. The fleet's numbers were enormous, and this was their first chance to confront them directly on a massive scale. Humans were invited to lead the reconnaissance. It was risky, but the Horizon Spear was the best chance anyone had of mapping the enemy's hidden corridors before committing the main force. The crew prepared. Systems were checked, energy pulses calibrated, and every rail cannon aligned. The slow, steady movements of the ship that had once been mocked were now their greatest strength. The engineers had reinforced the pulse system to its limits, creating a larger, more controlled energy wave that could disrupt multiple tunnels at once. But each pulse would drain power and stress the reactor to near breaking. Every use would bring the ship closer to a critical state. The journey to the Veilborn gathering point was tense. Every scanner reading, every faint distortion in space, was analyzed. The crew knew the enemy could be anywhere, waiting for a moment to strike. Their slow pace allowed careful observation, mapping distortions and recording patterns for the fleet to use. They were no longer just observing, they were creating the plan that could decide the fate of the galaxy. Finally, they reached the system. The first signs of the Veilborn appeared, subtle waves in space that shimmered and twisted, barely visible even to the trained human eye. The pulse system was activated, sending a controlled wave outward. Slowly, the distortions collapsed, revealing the enemy fleet for the first time in formation. Hundreds of ships appeared at once, sleek and dark, moving with unnatural coordination. The humans studied every movement. Every ship had a pattern, a rhythm, a pulse. The Horizon Spear calculated angles and positions with precision no other fleet could match. They relayed the information to the Council fleets, which moved cautiously into position based on human data. The difference was immediately apparent. Where previously fleets had rushed and been destroyed, now they moved like chess pieces, responding to openings and weaknesses identified by human observation. Then the attack began. Veilborn ships launched forward faster and more coordinated than ever. Their invisible tunnels allowed sudden strikes, appearing where no one expected. Even the human ship was momentarily forced to react. But the pulse system, already primed, fired a massive, focused wave that disrupted the enemy's tunnels. Ships that had once been untouchable flickered into visibility. Rail cannons fired, targeting weak points that only the humans had identified. The first major Veilborn losses were devastating. Ships that had destroyed entire fleets before were now struggling to maintain formation. The rest of the Council forces, guided by human calculations, joined in. Projectiles and energy pulses hit with devastating accuracy. The slow, deliberate pace of the Horizon Spear allowed continuous observation, adjusting tactics in real time. The Veilborn reacted. They adapted. They tried to rebuild their hidden corridors, shifting energy pulses and changing patterns. But each time, the humans had already observed the rhythm, predicting the next movement. For the first time in the war, the Veilborn were losing their advantage. The battle raged for hours. Fleets clashed in space, but the humans didn't seek glory. Their goal was not to destroy everything themselves. It was to guide the galaxy to victory. The crew of the Horizon Spear worked with quiet intensity, coordinating pulses, tracking enemy ships, and updating strategic data continuously. Every adjustment, every observation, made the Council fleets more effective. Despite their slow pace, the humans moved forward steadily, never panicked, never rushing. Every calculation was measured, every risk was considered, and every time the enemy attempted a sudden strike, the humans were ready. By nightfall in the distant system, the Veilborn fleet was in chaos. Their formations were broken, many ships destroyed, and those that remained struggled to escape. For the first time, the enemy seemed hesitant, uncertain. They had underestimated patience, observation, and the power of a calm, steady mind. The galaxy watched in awe. Humans, once mocked for a slow, unimpressive ship, had become the linchpin of victory. Every fleet, every soldier, every citizen who had doubted Earth's role in the war, now recognized the quiet, relentless strength of human strategy. But the battle was not without cost. The Horizon Spear's reactor was unstable. Every pulse used during the fight pushed the ship closer to critical levels. Warning lights flashed, alarms buzzed, and systems groaned under the strain. The crew worked tirelessly to stabilize power while continuing to guide fleet movements. Every decision mattered. A single mistake could destroy the ship, the crew, and the carefully built advantage they had created. The captain made a choice. They would risk one final pulse, one last wave to disrupt the remaining enemy tunnels and give the Council fleets a decisive edge. The crew braced for impact. Energy surged, systems strained, and the ship trembled violently. The pulse fired, sweeping across the system in a brilliant wave of light. The Veilborn fleet's last formations flickered into full visibility, their tunnels collapsing completely. Council fleets moved in, taking advantage of the opening. Coordinated attacks devastated the remaining enemy ships. By dawn, the Veilborn fleet was shattered, scattered, and forced to retreat into unexplored space. Silence followed. The galaxy was stunned. For the first time, the Veilborn had been truly defeated. Ships drifted in space, some damaged but intact. Council fleets regrouped, and the news spread quickly. Humans, with their slow, steady, and patient ship, had played the decisive role in turning the tide of the war. The Horizon Spear's crew, exhausted but composed, began the long process of stabilizing their systems. The reactor was barely holding, yet the ship remained functional. The crew understood that victory was not just about surviving. It was about ensuring the knowledge they had gained was preserved and used to protect the galaxy in the future. Across the galaxy, celebrations began, colonies rebuilt, fleets repaired, and hope returned to systems that had lived under constant fear. Humans did not seek recognition for themselves. They shared their data, their techniques, and their lessons with anyone willing to learn. The galaxy, once skeptical of Earth, now saw humans not as outsiders but as crucial allies. And somewhere deep in unexplored space, the Veilborn watched. They had learned, too, that the slow, patient approach of humanity could not be ignored. They would adapt, yes, but the galaxy had already seen the first proof that their stealth and speed could be countered. Humans had shown that understanding, calm, and observation could defeat even the deadliest of enemies. The Horizon Spear drifted through the fading light of battle, slower than ever, yet more powerful than any ship in the galaxy. The crew looked out at the stars, quiet but proud. They had done what no one else could. They had proven that courage was not measured by speed, that strength was not always shown in weapons, and that patience and understanding could turn the tide of war. In that moment, the slow human warship had become something more than metal and circuits. It had become a legend, a reminder to the galaxy that even the unassuming, the overlooked, and the underestimated could rise to change everything. And humanity, with its calm, steady determination, knew one thing clearly. This war had been won, but the lessons they had learned, the patience they had practiced, and the courage they had shown would guide them forever. They would be ready always for whatever came next, because in the end, speed and firepower could never match the power of a patient mind and an unwavering spirit. And that was why the Horizon's Spear, slow, steady, and methodical, would be remembered as the ship that changed the galaxy.